Good morning, Faith Community Church. We are in Luke chapter 2 of A Year in the New Testament. And most of you should know what Luke chapter 2 is. This is Christmas in February. But there's a lot more to this chapter than just Jesus' birth. In fact, it goes on all the way to the point where he turns 15. So it starts with the birth of Jesus here. It gets to the shepherds and the angels. And it gets over to Simeon's prophetic praise. And now Simeon is somebody who was told that he would not die until he would see the Messiah and see Jesus. And so this is one of the ways that Jesus is affirmed to be who he's rumored to be, that this is the Messiah who has come. And now Simeon says, "Now, Lord, you can take me because I've seen the Messiah." And then as they go on, we get to Anna's testimony, who's a prophetess, and she gives her testimony here, and she talks about, she begins to thank God and speak about him to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. And so then they talk about their return to Nazareth, and that's where Jesus grows up. And in the early stages of this passage, this is probably where the wise men came, where either right before they went to Nazareth or on one of their trips back, because it says that they go visit Jerusalem every year. And so the wise men obviously did not go back to Herod when he asked them to. And so he had been tricked. And so remember, the wise men would have come afterwards, in not the same time that the shepherds did. So, and at this point, at the very end of this chapter is what I want to touch on real quick, is when Jesus is in the temple in his Father's house, and he's talking with the Pharisees. He's talking with the people of the temple, and his parents are looking for him. They're worried about him. Basically, mom comes up and says, "Jesus, where have you been? I've been worried sick." And so Jesus saying that shouldn't I not be in my Father's house, basically, he ends up still obeying his parents. And when I was a kid, I would just ponder that for a second. Like, if I were God, why would I have to obey my parents? But you got to remember that Jesus is sinless, and honoring your parents is a command from God, and it's against God's nature to sin. And so he still honored his parents, and he still obeyed his parents there. And that brings me to Philippians 2, when it talks about Jesus humbling himself and his being in nature God, not something to be taken advantage of. And so he talks to his disciples at some point. We just read in Matthew not too long ago, talking about becoming the least of these. And one of these instances I see here on Luke 2 is that Jesus did humble himself to the point where he submitted himself to the authority of his earthly parents, and humbled himself in so many other ways, washing his disciples' feet, etc. But if God is God and he can humble himself down to the lowest of lows of even a child having to obey their parents, then we who are nowhere near the height and the amount of glory that Jesus is, that his being is, we can humble ourselves to be the least of these. And the only way that we're able to do that is by his Holy Spirit, being able to humble ourselves and not think too highly, because that's one of the slippery slopes, is we tend to, in some areas, think more highly of ourselves than we ought, whether it's sports, whether it's just in a skill or in social status. Sometimes we think of ourselves as superior, maybe even not to everyone. Maybe we think of ourselves as superior or better than others, or better than specific people, or we compare ourselves to other people, like the Pharisee who compared himself to the tax collector guy who was praying in the temple and saying, "Lord, I can't even look up." And the Pharisee is bold and looking up and saying, "Thank you for not letting me be this sinner over here." Sometimes we tend to have that attitude, and it's not a godly one. It's not something that's going to attract somebody to the love of God. That's not putting God's love on display. And so when we humble ourselves and when we bring ourselves low, one, God talks about that is the greatest among us, is those who make themselves the least and bring themselves the most low. But as a children's director, I've seen a lot of parents. Well, not a lot, but I've seen parents not necessarily model that behavior, and you can really tell a lot about parents through their kids and how they were raised. And it just shows so much when parents learn to model humility and learn to model making others' interests more important than themselves, how much that carries to the kids. And that really speaks to my heart, because I was the children's director before I even became a parent myself. And I've been able to learn a lot from these great parents that now I have some more camaraderie with, now that I've joined the ranks of being a parent. So especially in the case of whether you have kids in your life, whether they're your kids, your grandkids, if you're an aunt, uncle, even if you just go to this church and you don't have kids in your family of your own, it's just really important to be able to model that behavior for them, to be humble, to think of ourselves as we should, and really to be lifting God up and lifting Jesus up in glory, and increasing Him and decreasing ourselves. So anyway, that is Luke 2. We will see you guys on Sunday and then continue on Luke 3 on Monday. We'll see you later. Have a good day.